I didn't find out my wife betrayed me in a fight. I found out while I was burying my father. A stranger texted me 6 words. She already took the papers. When I got home, my safe had been touched. My father's documents were missing, and my wife was already meeting a lawyer to transfer property using a forged signature. Mine. What happened next didn't end in tears. It ended in court. I run operations for a logistics company outside Atlanta. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest. Contracts, carrier schedules, payroll approvals, safety audits. My day is built on details most people don't notice until something breaks. I've always liked that. If you keep your name clean and your numbers right, you can sleep at night. My personal life hasn't been as neat. I'd already been through one marriage that ended with quiet paperwork and a lot of swallowed pride. My son Malik lives with me now, 14 and sharp-eyed in that way teenagers are. I've tried to be steady for him. I've tried to show him what it looks like when a man doesn't fold just because life gets loud. That's how I've always lived. Hold the line. Don't make a scene. Handle it. Marissa came into my life a few years after the divorce. She was warm at first, quick with laughter, the kind of woman who liked to touch your arm when she talked. Somewhere along the way, that warmth turned into something else. Short comments, little digs, questions that weren't really questions. My father's health started to slide last year. Heart issues, then complications, then that slow decline that drains your mind before it drains your body. I made the drive to Savannah whenever I could. A lot of weekends, a lot of missed sleep, a lot of meals eaten in my truck. Marissa hated it. "You run down there like he's your whole life," she said one night while I stood at the kitchen counter sorting prescription receipts. "He's my father," I answered, not looking up. "And I'm your wife." The way she said wife sounded like a claim, not a role. I still didn't argue. I'd learned what arguments do. They don't fix the problem. They just give it a microphone. So I kept my mouth shut and did what needed doing. I told myself the tension would pass. I told myself grief makes people act strange. I told myself the same thing over and over until it sounded like truth. When my father died, the call came early. I was standing in the warehouse lot, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other. My aunt's voice was thin. I remember the way the trucks kept moving behind me like nothing had changed. Marissa didn't cry. She didn't even pretend to. "So when are we going?" she asked. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Are you okay?" Just logistics, like we were planning a weekend trip. We drove down to Savannah in silence except for her phone calls. She stayed busy, texting, whispering. Every now and then I'd catch her glancing at me, then looking away like she'd decided something. The funeral itself blurred. A small church, old men in dark suits, my father's friends hugging me hard and calling me son, like they meant it. I did what I always do, shook hands, thanked people, kept my voice steady. Malik stood beside me, shoulders stiff, doing his best to act grown. Then we went out to the cemetery. It was cold enough to make your fingers ache. I watched them lower my father into the ground. Dirt hit wood with that sound you never forget. When the service ended, I stayed back. I couldn't leave him yet, not right away. I bent down and scooped up a handful of soil. It clung under my nails. My hands looked like my father's hands in that moment, work-worn, dark, rough at the knuckles. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. 6 words, no punctuation. She got the papers already. For a second I thought it had to be wrong. Someone meant to text somebody else. A mistake. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I looked up. Marissa stood a few yards away with her mother Denise. They weren't comforting each other. They weren't even sad. Their heads were close, voices low, and Denise's eyes kept shifting past me toward our car like she was watching a countdown. Marissa nodded once. Denise touched her elbow, guiding her like this was coordinated. I stared at them longer than I should have. Something in my chest tightened. Not anger, not yet. More like that moment when you realize you've been standing in the wrong line, and you're already too deep to step out without losing your place. Malik called my name softly behind me. I wiped my hands on my slacks, feeling the grit stay behind, and started walking toward the car without saying anything. My phone still open in my palm as if it could explain itself if I held it long enough. I got to the car and held the door for Malik. He climbed in without a word, staring straight ahead like he was trying not to let anything show. Marissa slid into the passenger seat. Denise climbed in the back, and nobody mentioned the text. Nobody mentioned anything at all. The drive from the cemetery to the church hall was short, long enough for Denise to talk. "Your father lived a long life," she said, voice soft, like she was offering comfort. Then she added, just as easily, "Now it's on you to handle what's next." Marissa nodded like that was a blessing. I kept my eyes on the road. My hands stayed at 10 and 2. I could feel Malik watching me from the corner of his eye. That boy has always read people better than he should have to. The church hall was packed. Folding tables, aluminum pans, people moving around with paper plates. The usual post-funeral routine, where everyone tries to act normal while grief sits in the room like a heavy coat. Folks came up, hugged me, asked how I was holding up. I answered the way I always do. I'm managing. A few older women patted my shoulder and told me my father was proud of me. I believed them. I also knew those same women would carry any rumor they heard like it was scripture. Denise found her place fast. She moved through the crowd like she owned the air. She hugged my aunt, whispered to my cousins, leaned into conversations just enough to leave a mark. When she reached a table where some of Marissa's relatives were sitting, she lifted her chin and spoke loud enough for half the room to hear. "A man's supposed to carry the weight," she said. "That's what a husband does. Don't let a woman have to drag the load." A few people murmured agreement. A couple men nodded, like they'd been waiting for permission. My jaw tightened. Not because she was wrong about responsibility, but because she wasn't saying it to honor my father. She was saying it to pin me down, to remind the room who she thought I was supposed to be. Marissa stayed close, too close. Every time someone approached me, she drifted in like she needed to supervise the conversation. If I stepped away to get water, she stepped too. If Malik went to the bathroom, she kept track of him like she was counting. I watched all of it and stayed quiet. That's the part people don't understand about men like me. We don't stay silent because we're weak. We stay silent because we're calculating, because we've learned that the wrong word at the wrong time can cost you everything. Then Marissa did it. We were standing near the back, close to the serving line. My Uncle Reggie was talking about my father's old fishing stories, trying to lighten the mood. People laughed. Someone wiped their eyes. For a moment, it almost felt like a family again. Marissa turned toward me, sweet as pie. "So, did he leave you anything?" she asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The question floated up like smoke. Heads shifted. Plates paused mid-air. Even my aunt's eyes flicked toward me. I stared at her. That wasn't grief speaking. That was strategy. "Today's not the day," I said. Marissa blinked, then gave a small shrug like I was being dramatic. "I'm just asking. People are going to wonder." Denise appeared at her shoulder as if she'd been summoned. "It's a fair question," she said. "Families need clarity, especially when there are assets." My uncle cleared his throat, uncomfortable. My aunt looked down at her hands. Nobody stepped in. Nobody told them to stop. That's what hurt more than the question itself. The room let it happen. Malik moved closer to me, his body tense. I put a hand on his back, not because he needed comfort, but because I needed to remind myself I still had something solid. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, but no message this time, just a missed call. I excused myself and walked toward the doors, needing air, needing space, needing something that wasn't full of eyes and whispers. Outside, the parking lot stretched out with cars lined tight. I spotted Mateo leaning against his truck, hands in his jacket pockets. Mateo and I went back years. He's a paramedic in Atlanta, the kind of man who sees tragedy for a living and still finds a way to laugh at dumb jokes. He drove down as soon as I called. He watched me come out, took one look at my face, and pushed off the truck. "You all right?" he asked. I let out a breath that felt stuck in my ribs. "I don't know what this is," I admitted, "but it doesn't feel like grief." Mateo nodded slowly like he'd been waiting for me to say it. "Brother," he said, lowering his voice, "you're being boxed in." I didn't answer right away. My gaze drifted back to the church doors. Through the glass, I could see Marissa moving between tables, smiling, touching shoulders, acting like the perfect wife. In her hand was a slim black folder, my father's folder, the one I'd brought from Savannah to keep close. I couldn't remember handing it to her. I couldn't remember her ever asking. Mateo followed my eyes. "That yours?" he asked. I swallowed. "Yeah," I said. My feet started walking before I made a decision, and Mateo fell in beside me as I headed back toward the doors, trying to keep my face steady while my mind ran through every possible way that folder could have ended up in her hands. I stepped back into the church hall, kept my face neutral, and walked straight toward Marissa. She was mid-conversation with one of my cousins, smiling like she hadn't just asked the most disrespectful question possible. The black folder sat under her arm like a purse. "Let me hold that," I said. Her smile stayed put, but her eyes sharpened. "Why?" she asked. "Because it's my father's," I replied. Denise appeared again, right on time. "She's helping," Denise said. "You're overwhelmed." I didn't argue. I simply reached out. Marissa hesitated, then handed it over like she was doing me a favor. The folder felt lighter than it should have. That bothered me more than her attitude. Mateo watched the whole exchange without saying a word. When I looked back at him, he gave a small nod, like he understood exactly what I was thinking. Don't react, just remember. The rest of the afternoon crawled. People ate, talked, cleaned up, and slowly drifted away. I kept Malik close. Marissa acted like everything was fine. Denise kept dropping little comments about doing the right thing and keeping the family together. I said thank you a lot and meant none of it. That night we drove back to Atlanta. Marissa slept for most of the trip. Malik had his headphones on, but I could tell he wasn't listening to anything. Mateo followed behind us for a while, then peeled off near Macon. Before he left, he called me. "You want me to come by tomorrow?" he asked. "I'm good," I said. "That's not what I asked." I paused. "Yeah," I answered. "Come by." When I pulled into our driveway, the house looked the same as it always did. Porch light on, curtains drawn. Quiet neighborhood. That kind of normal can fool you if you let it. Inside, something felt off the second I walked past the office. The filing cabinet that held my father's paperwork, deeds, insurance forms, a thick binder of medical records, had been shifted a few inches. Not much. Just enough that anyone who actually knew the room would notice. The desk chair sat at a different angle. One drawer was slightly open. Marissa flipped the hallway light on and yawned. "I cleaned up in here earlier," she said casually. "It was a mess." "When?" I asked. "While you were gone," she answered, like that settled it. On the corner of the desk sat the key to my safe. Not inside the little bowl where I always kept it, not in my pocket, right there on the wood, like someone wanted it to be seen. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Marissa moved toward the kitchen. "I'm going to bed," she said. "Tomorrow's going to be a lot." I didn't stop her, didn't question her, didn't follow her upstairs. Malik went to his room without speaking. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close. Then I walked back into the office and shut the door behind me. The safe itself was tucked behind a cabinet panel. It wasn't forced. No scratches, no broken hinges, just slightly warmer than it should have been, like it had been opened recently. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the room. Every drawer, every stack of paper, the angle of the chair, the position of the cabinet. Then I opened my doorbell camera app and scrolled back through the footage from Savannah. Marissa came and went while I was gone. More than once. Always alone. Always during daylight. Once, she carried a bag I didn't recognize. I saved every clip to a separate folder and backed it up to the cloud. Then I sat down at my desk and stared at the safe key like it was a live wire. Around 2 in the morning, I stepped outside, got in my truck, and drove to the empty lot behind my warehouse. I parked under a streetlight, turned the engine off, and just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel. The next morning, during my first break, I called the title company in Atlanta that had handled one of my father's properties years back. My voice stayed steady. "Quick question," I said. "If someone shows up with a power of attorney, what's your process?" The woman on the line explained it like she'd said it 100 times. Verification, notarization, identity checks, a copy kept on file. I thanked her and ended the call before she could ask why. Sitting there alone in my truck, I tried to talk myself down. Maybe Marissa really was cleaning. Maybe I was seeing patterns that weren't there. Maybe grief was twisting my mind. But the text at the cemetery wouldn't let go, and neither would the way Denise watched the car like she was counting seconds. That morning, Marissa left her laptop open on the kitchen table while she showered. She'd been up early, moving around like she had somewhere important to be. humming under her breath like it was a regular Tuesday. I walked past the table, coffee in my hand, and the screen caught my eye. An email sat open in her inbox. Confirmation details, time, address, a name I didn't recognize at first. Then the subject line made my stomach tighten. POA/transfer. Below it was the name of a law office, Charlotte, North Carolina. My first instinct was to close the laptop and pretend I hadn't seen it. That's the reflex you build when you spend years trying to keep peace. Let it slide, let it go, handle it later. But later was how people like Marissa stayed ahead of you. I didn't touch her email, didn't forward it, didn't click around. I took a picture of the screen with my phone, then backed out like I was never there. By the time she came downstairs dressed and fully put together, makeup done, hair smooth, I was sitting on the couch, tying my work boots. "I've got errands," she said. "Sure," I replied. She hesitated, like she expected a question. When none came, she grabbed her purse and left. A few minutes later, Malik wandered into the living room, rubbing sleep out of his eyes. "You going to work?" he asked. "Not right away," I said. "Eat something." I waited 10 minutes, then drove out. The address in the email led to a coffee shop near the Fulton County Courthouse downtown. One of those places where lawyers and clerks grab caffeine between hearings. I parked across the street and walked in like I belonged there, ordered a black coffee, and chose a small table in the corner. Marissa was already inside. She sat with a man in a gray suit and a woman with a neat bun and a notary stamp pouch on the table. No grief, no sadness, just business. Marissa laughed once, tucked her hair behind her ear, and leaned forward like she was sealing a deal. I kept my eyes on my cup and watched through the side of my vision. The man slid a stack of papers toward her. She flipped through quickly, too quickly for someone reading carefully. Then she signed, not once, multiple signatures, confident strokes. She pushed the papers back. The woman stamped a page. The sound of the stamp landed in my head like a hammer. I didn't rush. I didn't slam a chair. I didn't cause a scene. I stood up, walked over, and stopped at the edge of their table. Marissa looked up and froze for half a second before she recovered. Her face shifted into annoyance, like I'd shown up late to something trivial. "Darius," she said, "what are you doing here?" I nodded at the papers. "Who gave you the right to sign that?" Her mouth tightened. She glanced at the man in the suit, then back at me. "I'm handling things," she said evenly. "You've had enough on your plate." "Handling what?" I asked. My voice stayed low. "My father's property?" She exhaled like I was exhausting. "You were busy burying him," she said. "Someone had to move fast." The man in the suit cleared his throat, trying to stay professional, but his eyes flicked between us like he'd stepped into something messy. "Sir," he said carefully, "your signature is already on the power of attorney." For a second I couldn't speak, not because I didn't understand the words, because my body did. It felt like somebody had pressed a thumb into my chest and held it there. A slow squeeze, a quiet threat. I looked at Marissa again. Really looked. No panic, no guilt, just that calm face she used when she thought she'd already won. "Show me," I said. The man hesitated, then slid a copy toward me. The name at the top was mine. The signature at the bottom tried to be mine. Close enough to fool a stranger, not close enough to fool me. Marissa leaned back in her chair. "Don't make this ugly," she said. I set the paper down, straightened it once like it mattered, and nodded. "I won't," I replied. Then I walked out of the coffee shop, got into my truck, and drove toward the bank without calling anyone, without texting, without even turning on the radio, keeping both hands locked on the wheel as my mind started sorting through the next steps like a checklist. Traffic downtown was thick, but I didn't feel it. I moved through lanes like I'd done it 100 times, mind already ahead of my hands. The bank my father used sat in Midtown, a branch he'd trusted for years. He'd mentioned it once, maybe twice, the way older men do when they don't want to sound like they're planning for death. "If anything happens, I've got a box," he'd said, "just in case." I parked, walked in, and took a number like everyone else. The lobby smelled like carpet and printer ink. A couple people waited in line, talking about car payments and overdrafts. Somebody laughed too loud near the ATM. Life kept moving, even when yours felt like it had been hit with a hammer. When the teller called me up, I slid my ID across the counter. along with the certified death certificate I'd picked up that morning, and the paperwork proving I was next of kin. My hands stayed steady. My stomach didn't. "I need to access my father's safe deposit box," I said. The teller, a young woman with tired eyes, blinked and gave me that practiced sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss," she replied. "We'll need a manager for this." She disappeared for a few minutes. Then the manager came out. Older man, calm voice, suit jacket that didn't quite fit. He looked at my documents, typed something into his computer, and nodded. "We can do it," he said, "but it'll take a little time. There are procedures." Procedures. The word landed wrong, not because it was unfair, but because it made grief feel like a transaction. He escorted me into a small private room off to the side. Beige walls, a round table, 2 chairs. He offered me water. I declined. Then he left me alone with a clipboard and a stack of forms. I signed where I was told, initialed where the boxes were highlighted. Every few minutes, someone opened the door to ask another question or bring another paper. Each time I answered politely, like this was just business. Almost 2 hours went by. Sitting in that quiet room, I kept thinking about Marissa's face at that coffee shop, how comfortable she'd been, how certain, like she'd practiced the moment. I also kept seeing my father in his living room, holding his pill organizer in one hand and the TV remote in the other, telling me he didn't want to be a burden, saying it like he was apologizing for aging. If I'd known what was happening, I would have asked more questions. I would have paid closer attention to the things he tried not to say. Finally, the manager returned with a woman from security. They carried a small metal box between them like it weighed more than it did. He set it on the table. "Mr. Coleman," he said, "this is your father's safe deposit box. We'll open it together." He inserted a key. I inserted the other key they'd issued me after verifying the records. The lock clicked. The lid lifted. Inside were neatly stacked folders, a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's handwriting, a thin binder labeled "Trust," a spare key taped to a note, even a faded photo of me and him standing beside my first car, both of us grinning like the world owed us nothing. I reached for the envelope first. My fingers hesitated, not because I was scared of paper, because I was scared of what it meant. This was my father's last voice. I opened it slowly. The letter wasn't long. He didn't do long. My father believed in saying what needed to be said and leaving the rest to God. "Darius," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I know you. You'll try to carry everything and pretend it doesn't hurt. Don't." He wrote about dignity, about boundaries, about how family can love you and still try to take from you. He told me he'd put the properties into a trust so nobody could rush in with shortcuts. Then he wrote the part that made my throat tighten. "If anyone brings a power of attorney after my death, it's fraud. If anyone signs as you, it's forgery. Don't argue with them. Don't beg. Let the paper do the talking." Attached to the letter was the trust document, official and clean, with the kind of language that doesn't care about tears. There was also a printed list of contacts. Elaine Harper, estate attorney, Charlotte office number. I didn't wait. I stepped out of the room, called her right there in the hallway, and introduced myself. Her voice came through crisp and unhurried, like she'd been expecting this call for years. "Mr. Coleman," she said, "do you have a copy of the power of attorney they're using?" "I saw it," I answered. "I have a photo, and I have video of my wife going into my office while I was out of town." She didn't react the way most people would. No gasp, no soft sympathy. "Good," she said. "Then this becomes simple." "Simple?" I repeated. "Not easy," she corrected. "Simple. You no longer have a choice between peace and safety. You have a choice between the truth and being swallowed." I thanked her, ended the call, and walked back out to the parking lot with my father's letter pressed flat against my palm. Sitting in my truck, I noticed my hands shaking slightly for the first time all day. I took a slow breath, unfolded the letter again, and read the last line twice, like I needed to hear his voice one more time before I turned the key in the ignition. I drove to Charlotte the same afternoon, still in my work clothes, tie loosened, letter from my father folded in my jacket pocket like a weight. The highway gave me too much time to think, so I kept my mind on tasks instead. Fuel, directions, the list of documents Elaine told me to bring. Her office sat in an uptown building with clean lines and quiet hallways. Everything looked expensive in a way that didn't ask for approval. The receptionist didn't smile much, but she treated me like I belonged there. That mattered more than friendliness. Elaine Harper walked out a few minutes later. Mid-40s, sharp suit, hair pulled back, eyes that didn't drift. She shook my hand once and guided me into her office without small talk. "Let's see what they used," she said. I handed her the photo of the power of attorney and the screenshot of the email confirmation. She looked at them the way I look at a shipping invoice, scanning for what's missing, what doesn't fit. "This isn't just messy," she said. "This is fraud, forgery, attempted transfer, possibly conspiracy depending on who signed and who stamped." Hearing those words out loud did something to me. Betrayal is emotional. Fraud is measurable. There's a strange comfort in that. Elaine slid a legal pad toward me and started writing bullet points. "First rule," she said, tapping the paper. "Stop talking to your wife about this. No more confrontation. No more questions. Every conversation is a chance for her to adjust her story." I nodded. "Second," she continued, "we contact the title companies involved. We put a hold on any transaction tied to your father's properties. No exceptions. We send notice today." She reached for her phone and spoke to an assistant like she'd already mapped the whole chessboard. "Third," she said, "we notify the bank and the notary board. If a notary stamped this without proper verification, they're exposed too." She looked at me then, calm and direct. "You have to understand something, Mr. Coleman. If you treat this like a marriage problem, you'll lose. This is a legal problem. You're going to handle it like one." I pulled out my phone and showed her the doorbell camera clips. She watched Marissa entering the house, leaving again, carrying that unknown bag. Elaine asked for the timestamps. I gave them. She asked if my home office had a safe. I told her yes. "Then we build a timeline," she said, "hour by hour, from the moment you left for Savannah to the moment you confronted her. Every email, every call log, every receipt, we document everything." She didn't say it like advice. She said it like an order. I could do that. Timelines were my world. If a truck goes missing, you don't guess. You reconstruct. We worked for 2 hours. Elaine printed forms, marked sections, and gave me a short list of tasks. Request copies of notarized documents, pull my credit report, change my account passwords, store backups off-site. She also told me to keep the original trust documents locked away. "And don't go home tonight if you don't have to," she added, almost casually. People get desperate when they realize the door is closing. I booked a hotel nearby and checked in after dark. My phone stayed in my hand the whole elevator ride. In the room, I laid everything out on the bed, letter, trust binder, printouts, like I was staging an audit. Around 10, an unknown number texted me. "Don't make this bigger. You'll lose everything." No name, no context, just a threat dressed up as advice. I stared at it, then took a screenshot and forwarded it to Elaine. A few minutes later, I stepped outside to the parking lot to grab something from my trunk. The night air hit my face, sharp enough to wake me up. As I walked, I noticed a sedan idling 2 rows over, headlights off, engine running. Nobody got out. I slowed down without stopping, pulled my keys tighter in my fist, and kept moving toward my car, counting steps the way I count pallets on a dock, quietly, automatically, making sure I didn't miss anything. I didn't sleep much. By sunrise, I was back on I-85, coffee burning my tongue, jaw tight from clenching. The whole drive home, I rehearsed what I would and wouldn't do. No shouting, no pleading, no trying to win her heart back. Elaine's words stayed in my head like a rule posted on a warehouse wall. Stop talking. The house was loud when I walked in. Not music, voices. My stomach dropped before I even saw who was there. Denise's laugh floated from the kitchen, too bright for a grieving week. I heard chairs scrape. Somebody's phone rang. Then Malik appeared in the hallway, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. Marissa stood behind him, one hand resting on his shoulder like she owned him. "Hey, baby," she said to him, not to me. Her voice sounded sweet, almost motherly. "Your dad's just stressed right now. He's dealing with money stuff, big feelings." Malik didn't look up. His hands were shoved deep in his hoodie pockets. That's when I understood what she'd done while I was gone. She didn't just move papers, she moved people. Denise stepped into view, wiping her hands with a dish towel like she was hosting Sunday dinner. "There he is," she said. "We were worried." Behind her, 3 of Marissa's cousins sat at my dining table with plates of food like they'd been invited. One of them glanced at me, then away, the way folks do when they've already chosen a side but don't want to admit it. Marissa crossed her arms. "You disappeared," she said. "No calls, no explanation. Do you know how that looks?" I kept my coat on, kept my keys in my hand. Not because I planned to leave, but because I didn't want to feel trapped. "Where did all these people come from?" I asked. Denise scoffed. "Family," she said. "That's what you say you care about, right?" Then she leaned toward Marissa, loud enough for everyone. "He's acting like this because he wants everything your father-in-law left. That's what men do when money shows up. They forget everybody else." One of the cousins nodded, as if she'd just stated a fact. I could feel heat rising up my neck. Not rage, more like humiliation, like being called a thief in my own living room. Marissa's eyes filled with tears on command. "I'm scared," she said, voice cracking. "He's not himself. After the funeral, he's been cold. He's been obsessed." Denise turned toward the hallway window. "You hear that?" she called out, like she was performing for the neighbors. "We're trying to help him and he's spiraling." That was the moment the room shifted from uncomfortable to dangerous. Not because anyone threatened me with a weapon, because they were building a story around me while I stood there. A story that could cost me my job, my reputation, custody, everything. I looked at Malik again. He finally raised his eyes. They were red, but he wasn't crying. He looked like a kid trying to decide which adult was lying. I stepped forward. "Malik," I said, "come with me." Marissa tightened her grip on his shoulder. "He doesn't need—" I didn't argue with her. I didn't even look at her. I reached for my son's wrist gently and guided him down the hall. Denise followed 2 steps behind. "You can't just—" I turned my head slightly. "Stay out here," I said. The tone in my voice stopped her. Not because it was loud, because it wasn't. Inside Malik's room, I shut the door and leaned against it for a second, listening to the muffled voices outside. Malik stood near his bed, uncertain. I crouched so we were eye level. "Look at me," I said. He did. "Do you trust me?" I asked. He swallowed. His gaze flicked to the door, then back to me. A few seconds passed. Then he nodded once, small and firm. Air moved back into my lungs. "Okay," I said. "Then don't listen to anybody talking for me. If you're confused, you come to me. Always." He nodded again. I opened the door and stepped back into the living room. The conversation stopped like someone had hit pause. Marissa dabbed her eyes with a napkin, still performing. I faced her. "You just crossed the last line," I said, voice even. Denise opened her mouth, ready to jump in, but I held up one hand without looking at her. "This is between me and my wife," I added. Marissa's expression changed. The tears dried up quick, her jaw set. I walked past the table, past the plates, past the people who didn't belong in my house, and headed for my office, already reaching for my phone to call Elaine while the sound of Denise's voice rose behind me like static. Elaine didn't answer on the first ring, but she called back within 10 minutes. "Don't engage them," she said the moment I picked up. "If they're in your house, you document. If they refuse to leave, you call the police. No arguing, no negotiating." I kept my voice low, even with Denise still talking in the other room. "She brought my son into it," I said. Elaine paused, just long enough to let me know she heard the weight of that. "Then you stop treating this like a marriage," she replied. "You treat it like an attack." After the call, I walked back into the living room. Denise was mid-sentence, telling someone I was not stable. Marissa leaned against the counter, watching me with that steady look, as if she was daring me to explode. I didn't give her the satisfaction. "Everybody needs to go," I said. One of the cousins laughed. "Or what?" I turned my phone screen toward them, not showing evidence, just showing the dial pad with 911 ready. "Or you'll leave with an officer," I said. That was all it took. Nobody wants a report on record when they've been playing victim. Chairs scraped. Platemacy got abandoned. Denise muttered curses under her breath while they filed out. Marissa stayed. She tilted her head. "You really think you can do this to me?" she asked. "You did it to yourself," I said, and walked past her into my office. The next morning, Elaine emailed me a full copy of the notarized packet Marissa had used. Real documents, not just the photo from the coffee shop. I printed every page at work, locked the door of my office, and laid them out across my desk. 3 things jumped out fast. First, the notary's stamp date didn't match the time listed on the signature page. One said Monday morning, the other said Monday afternoon. A sloppy mistake, but a mistake that mattered. Second, the signature looked like mine in the way a counterfeit bill looks like money. It had the shape, but it didn't have the rhythm. My hand has a slight tremor in the last stroke of my last name, old injury from a warehouse accident years ago. This signature was too smooth, too confident, like someone drew it instead of wrote it. Third, and most important, the packet listed a witness, a man named Marcus Noland. I knew that name. Marcus used to work with Marissa's cousin. I'd met him once at a cookout. He was loud, always joking, always trying to look important. But I also knew one other detail. Marcus had been in Florida the week my father died. I'd seen it myself because he posted pictures from Miami like he was proud of it. He couldn't have been there. Not in Atlanta. Not in that coffee shop. Not signing anything. I sent Elaine a message with that detail, plus the screenshot of Marcus's post, plus the timestamp. She replied with one line. "Good. That's your wedge." Around lunch, I met Mateo at Piedmont Park. Not because I needed comfort, because I needed a place to breathe without my house feeling like a courtroom. Mateo handed me a bottle of water and leaned back against the hood of his truck. "How bad is it?" he asked. I told him the basics. The forged signature, the notary, the fake witness, Denise turning my living room into a stage. Mateo shook his head slowly. "You got enough," he said. "Don't let them drag you into the mud. That's where they win." Marissa tried anyway. That evening she posted a long message on Facebook, vague but sharp, praying for strength while dealing with emotional abuse. Her friends jumped in with heart emojis and "Stay strong, sis." Denise commented twice, making sure everyone knew I was unstable since the funeral. A few hours later, my supervisor at work called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable. "Everything okay at home?" he asked. Somebody had reached out. Denise didn't just want sympathy, she wanted leverage. I kept my hands folded in front of me and answered like a man who understands risk. "There's a family matter being handled legally," I said. "It won't affect my job." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right," he said, "just take care of yourself." Back at my desk, I forwarded Elaine the screenshot of Marissa's post and the note about my boss being contacted. Elaine called me late, voice low. "The notary board opened an inquiry," she said, "and if that notary flips, your wife won't be able to deny anything." I stared out the window at the loading docks below, watching forklifts glide in neat lines. Everything down there ran on process, on proof, on records. For the first time in days, my chest loosened, not because I felt happy, because the pieces were finally clicking into place. Elaine met me at the Fulton County Courthouse entrance with a folder tucked under her arm and a calm look that made everything feel smaller than it had felt at home. I wore the same kind of suit I'd wear to a client meeting. Nothing flashy, no new shoes, no revenge outfit. Just clean and simple, like I was showing up for work. We went through security, rode the elevator, and walked down a hallway filled with people holding their lives in manila envelopes. Some whispered, some argued, some sat alone, staring at the floor. Nobody looked heroic. Everybody looked tired. Elaine checked in at the clerk's window, then leaned toward me. "Remember," she said quietly, "your job is to stay steady. Let me do the talking." I nodded. My phone stayed in my pocket. My hands stayed open. I didn't want anyone to say I looked aggressive. Marissa arrived 10 minutes later. She came with Denise and a lawyer I'd never seen before, a thin white man with a sharp tie and a confident stride. Marissa wore a dark dress and carried tissues like props. As soon as she spotted me, her face crumpled. "Oh my God," she whispered, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "I can't believe you're doing this." Denise wrapped an arm around her as if she was protecting her from me. The lawyer leaned in and spoke to her softly. Marissa dabbed her eyes and nodded, already rehearsed. We went into the courtroom when our case was called. The judge sat high above us with the kind of expression you develop after hearing every excuse in the world. Everyone stood. Before I could answer, Marissa added, "He said it verbally. Not everything is written down in a marriage." Denise nodded hard behind her, like she was witnessing truth. Marissa wiped her cheeks, and then threw doorbell camera footage showing Marissa entering my office while I was out of town. Email metadata confirming she scheduled the meeting herself. A comparison report showing the signature didn't match known samples. Elaine pointed to the notary. Her tears stopped. Her face went flat. Her eyes searched the room like she was trying to find a door that wasn't there. Elaine sat down without celebrating. I stayed still, feeling my heartbeat slow, watching the clerk stamp paperwork, while Marissa's lawyer whispered fast into her ear, and Denise clenched her jaw. And I finally understood what my father meant when he wrote, "Let the paper do the talking." The hallway outside the courtroom filled up fast. People stepped around us like we were furniture. Marissa's lawyer spoke in a tight whisper, pointing at the papers Elaine had filed. Denise kept her mouth shut for once, but her face said enough. Marissa didn't look at me. She stared at the floor, like the tiles might give her a new plan. Elaine walked beside me toward the elevator. "This doesn't end today," she said, "but the direction is set." By the end of that week, the title companies had frozen everything tied to my father's properties. The notary board opened a formal investigation and suspended the notary's commission pending review. Elaine filed a civil complaint for attempted fraudulent transfer and attorney's fees. If Marissa kept pushing, criminal exposure was on the table too. Denise tried to come back to the house one more time. The officer who served the temporary restraining order didn't raise his voice. He just explained the boundaries, handed her the documents, and waited while she read them with shaking hands. She stood on my porch, staring at me like I was the one who'd betrayed her. I didn't speak. Within 2 weeks, I moved out. Not because I was running, because the place didn't belong to me anymore. Too many fingerprints, too many lies baked into the walls. Malik and I found a smaller apartment north of Atlanta. 2 bedrooms, basic furniture, a clean start. He complained about the smaller kitchen, then asked if he could pick the new curtains for his room. That's how kids heal. They start claiming space. Marissa sent messages every day for a while. Long ones, emotional ones. Sometimes she apologized. "I never meant to hurt you." Other times, she attacked. "You're destroying our family over paperwork." I didn't reply. I forwarded every text to Elaine, and that was it. My feelings weren't a negotiation tool anymore. One night, after Malik fell asleep, I drove down to Tybee Island alone. I sat in my truck near the water with the windows cracked and my father's letter in my lap. I didn't pray for her. I didn't ask God to soften my heart. I didn't search for a reason that would make it all feel fair. I just stayed there, listening to the steady sound outside, letting the silence do what it does best, hold the